Well, did anybody have a burning question that they were really eager to ask? If not, I'll get it. You have a question?
Just what is copyright issues when using her work? And
Sure.
taking it apart, kind of? Like, is there issues with that as an art? I mean,
I think there's any, I think if you're using it for art, this is actually like one of those, it's hit or miss. Like, for instance, there's a famous artist named Jeff Koons who is using a lot of image, appropriated image, and he was using it in parody. And he was also like making the sizes like really big. And sometimes artists like who painted like the postcards or whatever he was using in parody, sometimes they would bring him to court and they would lose. Sometimes he would lose. But I think when it's in art like this, I think Mike Cloud's a little bit protected because he's not mass producing these out for sales, like t-shirt sales. But I'm not totally sure. I'm not a lawyer, so
Yeah.
it really is a good question for a lawyer.
I have no idea. I mean, I think of, I guess it was Richard Serra in New York, or no, Richard Prince
Oh, right.
at Gagosian Gallery stole Instagram pictures or something online, and then he blew them up like 40 by 50 inches or something, and put them in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then this other artists who I know of, got really upset because Richard Prince stole his picture, and then he sent out a press release saying that his work was in Gagosian Gallery because Richard Serra stole his Instagram picture. But no one that I know of sued anyone for that show. But I think there's probably copyright in the book, but I don't think Leibovitz is like going after Mike Cloud with lawyers.
He could also be changing it enough
Yeah.
that it's no longer Leibowitz's work.
Yeah.
The only way that you can really sort of identify Leibowitz is, in some cases, is he's sort of telling us. But I mean, I would just, you know, as an artist speaking, I like to do and apologize later. Because if I worry about things, then I won't do anything because I'll be very concerned, like, oh, someone's going to sue me. Sometimes a lawsuit, it can be a good thing for your career too, and not just like your notoriety, but just like these issues of copyright. Like, when is somebody a celebrity and when are they their person? When they're posing for Annie Leibovitz, are they a celebrity? Like, all those kind of issues can come out of that.
Well, the irony of it is that she was sued so much, or she got in legal trouble like 5 or 6 years ago because she was spending too much money or something, and I guess some estate bought her work, and then like it wasn't her work anymore. So that's an interesting issue in terms of like how, like who owns the copyright to her work.
It's like the Beatles.
Yeah, but I have no idea. So.
Well, she's just involved in a case in Nova Scotia too, where a museum, a collector bought like 2,000 pieces from her collection and donated them to the museum in Nova Scotia. But Nova Scotia's museum can't show them until they get released from, get her approval. So she's kind of tied up in this other issue now. So she's got the final say. So in this case, like, she doesn't have to approve of these being shown. So it's
How did you, what got you thinking about the song in the shelter and the twisting and turning that you were talking, like what led from this to the song in your mind?
Well, because when I saw The Rape of Sabine, and it was, you know, it's a pretty strong art historical, it's been painted by a lot of different people. And it's always with the figure. And I remember in art history class, especially that sculpture, they always talked about the body, or the shape of the sculpture, the contrapposto. They never really talked about the actual event. It was sort of like sidelined. And same thing with the paintings. Like, it was always about like who it was, what it was, and why it was amazing was because of all the contrapposto. And there's beauty in that, right? There's beauty in looking at that contrapposto. But at the same time, there's talking about something that's like very hideous. Like the abduction of women is very hideous. Rape of women is very hideous. And so I was like, oh, he's sort of, I thought like maybe like he's putting himself sort of in line with the canon. But what he's also doing is he's, in many ways, he's removing that beauty. He's removing, like I said, the figure to get to that visceral body. And so, you know, when I see that word rape, I think more about it than when I see the twists and turns of the sculpture. So that's, then the song, my husband and I were talking, and he's like, remember that clip? And I was like, oh, right. And, you know, the Mary Clayton clip, I was like, yeah, because that song, like, gave me, like, really chills, and it made me think about, like, you know, like, when you're laying in bed at night, and you hear sirens go off, and then you hear a gunshot, like, it's just, like, a totally different visceral feeling than, like, Give Me Shelter is kind of a song you can kind of dance to, right? But her singing it, not so much. It gets, like, to this core, like, in your spine. So that's how I ended up there. You know, that might not be what he's sort of after, but that's what I sort of interpreted from that as like a metaphor.
You talked about in the collage pieces how you know, of course they're hanging in space. You can see them from either side. I wondered if the two of you could talk about, as photographers, how you choose to present your work, what you think about him turning these photographs into a more sculptural piece. Yeah.
I like that they're sculptural pieces. I like that they're collages. I like that they're hanging from the ceiling. And I guess I consider the pictures, I consider the collages evidence towards what his point of view is about the world, or like point of view about Leibovitz's pictures are. And as I hope I communicated, I'm not quite sure what he feels about Leibovitz's work. And you asked, I present my work on the wall, like in frames usually. But I saw a show, Stephen Shore at MoMA in New York recently, a couple of months ago, and he had a room with 2 frames on either side, so you could like walk to see 2 different pictures on either side. But I've never seen a photograph. That's not true. I have seen photographs like that. I haven't seen collage work like this ever, that breaks up the frame this way, but I have seen photographers hang their work in space like this on silk or something, so it's transparent. But I'm interested in how this changes how photography is understood, and how appropriation is understood, how he's approaching another photographer's work or using the canon of photography to talk about something else. But I don't make work like this, but I'm interested in the content of it.
What was the intention of the artist to make this kind of frame? Do you know? What was the intention of the artist to make this kind of frame that you can look through
In the collage pieces?
Yeah, in the collage piece.
Oh, the curves on the edge?
No, that is not only the curves of the edge, they have a lot of ore. So it seems that it's a curtain where you can look through. Is that you have an evidence on front, but you have another perspective behind the evidence. So I just wanted, I was wondering if you know what was the intention of the artist. Was this the intention? So to make you thinking about over the piece.
I didn't hear that in his talk, but I agree with you that that is a meaningful gesture in terms of how...
For sure, it must be, I think.
It has to be, yeah, it's undeniable.
It has to be a statement or something.
He's cutting, I feel like he's cutting the photo and removing things to sort of get back to the content of photography. I think that's kind of what you're saying too, right? Like photography, I always think photography is just as much about seeing as is just as much about not seeing. And he's gaining more, like Annie Leibovitz had control when she put the camera in front of all these people and what she chose to frame and how she chose to construct it. And then you're sort of publishing a book. She's making these large prints and then she's publishing these magazines and these books. And what he's doing with cutting is he's also, I agree, the look through, the removal, but he's also inserting himself into the photo. And that's also, I mean, I think that can even get back to the copyright. Like, he's so inserted in these photos that she's reduced out, and that gives him power. So in many ways, they're kind of like having this like tete-a-tete, or I don't know, he's like shadow boxing with Annie Leibovitz, right? Like,
shadow is actually created shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there is a lot of meaning on creating that kind of work like this, on what you see and what you don't see, and what you can imagine or you cannot.
Mhm.
You know, it's.
Well, he's breaking down. He's making an additive. He's doing an additive process, adding together his pictures, collaging them together, and then breaking down parts of Leibovitz's photograph. So that is, like, to summarize what he's doing. But like to remove part of Uma Thurman, like I don't. That's clearly a meaningful gesture, like to look through the piece. But I don't know if he's trying to necessarily point to one specific intentional message with that. I think it's a little bit more, expansive and a little bit more ambiguous or something.
He did mention this a bit in the question and answer portion
Yeah.
of his talk. He said, and I'm not sure about the full thought process, but he said in each of the photos he cut out what he saw as the focal point.
Oh, the punctum,
And-
that's right.
And he
Oh.
removed them and placed them all along the side, so that that odd shape on the side are those physical focal points that he removed, because he
Yeah,
wanted this
little
piece to
punctum.
have no focal point, for you to lose the subject, like you were saying.
punctum is also interesting because Roland Barthes developed this terminology of punctum. He's a French philosopher and he wrote about many things, but one of the things he talked about was photography, and he published this book, Camera Lucida, in 1981. And he talked about studium and punctum. And studium is what the photographer's intentions were. So for instance, Annie Leibovitz's intention, we keep talking about the Uma Thurman photo. I think this is the one,
Yeah.
right? The actress Uma Thurman. And so Annie Leibovitz's intention was to bring Uma and, you know, put her in this black outfit or whatever and take her photo. And we, as an audience, can all agree what the punctum was, what the photographer's intentions were. But the punctum is like the little tiny spark that's in every single photo. But for all of us, it's all different. My punctum's different than Paolo's punctum's different than your punctum and your punctum. Sometimes there's overlaps of punctum, but you know what, that weird little thing, it's like when you look at a picture of your grandmother in a hat, and it's that weird little feather gesture or something that you might see that wasn't an intention. And so I think that's really important, because if he's going around removing punctum, he's removing his punctum,
Yeah.
and he's inserting himself even more by removing out. So he's taking himself,
Yeah.
his ideas out and putting himself in, so to speak.
I feel like that's really generous. I don't know if I'd be that generous. Like I don't know if all of Leibovitz's photographs even have punctum necessarily.
They have to, though.
No, they don't.
Every photo has punctum.
No, they don't. I don't think so. I mean.
Not for you.
Oh. Okay. Sorry.
There are people who like her work, but,
No,
but every photo does have punctum, right?
I still don't think that's true. I mean, to me, Leibovitz's pictures, they're photo shoots, right? And it's like, that doesn't mean all the pictures have punctums. But to me, like a punctum, like the thing that makes the picture that makes you look twice, for example, is like the Henry Cartier-Bresson picture, the man jumping over the puddle. I know Leibovitz's work really well. I looked at that book a lot when I was in high school and stuff. I feel like I know it really well. And so I don't know if there's like always a thing in a picture that makes it like an amazing photograph. But I could see, I guess I appreciate that idea of the punctum in the way that Claude uses it, because of the way that it deconstructs, I guess, the philosophy or narrative or the discussion of photography, and how, I guess, he's undermining that or playing with that or trying to think about it in a more critical way. So I think his work is interesting in its critical aspect of the work he's looking at and how he's using it for his work.
Yeah, I think you're right about it being his punctum specifically because he did talk about it not always being the thing that's in the sharpest focus. It might be something in the background that he thought was the most important aspect of the photo, and that's what he would choose to remove.
Or like that weird little itch you can't scratch when you're looking at the photo. I agree, some of her stuff, yes, because she's very like set up. But like some of the photos of her, the newborn baby,
Yeah.
you know, there was, you know, my punctum when I was looking at those was all the like stuff that comes out on the newborn. What do they call that? The viscose?
No idea.
The vernix. The vernix. The vernix. And I, you know, that was something that I was thinking about with my baby. I was like, oh, vernix, look at that. And so I had like, I still had like some kind of reaction to those photos, some kind of punctum. So that would be my punctum. But it also, it changes like what could be punctum in there. I think that's, I would say in this case, Mike Cloud is the smarter artist,
Agreed, absolutely.
right? Like he's the smarter artist.
Yes.
And it's totally fine for somebody to make money off their craft, you know, and she's made a
She
lot of
should.
money and she's made a lot of bad decisions with her money but, you know, and that's totally fine. But I think like what he's doing is he's pointing out, he's having this intellectual rift, not with her, but also with himself in many ways.
With
right?
photography,
With
yeah.
photography, yeah, because she is so well known.
Yeah, yeah.
I think students, and that's always for me their first introduction to like authorship and photography is
Yeah.
always Annie Leibovitz. Like, who's your favorite photographer? Why? Well, because I just really love it. I was like, if you didn't recognize the people, would you love it so much?
That's a
And
great question,
That's
yeah.
true. I don't know. And so there, you know, in many ways, you know, you have to credit Annie Leibovitz because it does get people a little bit jazzed, right? When
Yes,
they're young.
yes.
Got you jazzed.
Yes, I was jazzed,
Right.
yes.
And so, you know, it does have its role to play. But, you know, now like that we're older and more mature and looked at the medium, raised the scope of our awareness, there are certain things about Annie Leibovitz that are very trite. And
Yeah.
it can be kind of fun.
And problematic.
And problematic, and it's kind of fun to pick on Annie a little bit, right?
Yes. Well, another thing that came up to me that is still, I hope, still relevant, is that Leibovitz is a magazine photographer, was a magazine editorial photographer. All these cutouts are from books. They're not from magazines. They're not from like Vanity Fair or something. They're from the book itself. So like, I'm curious if that's a material decision, if that's a conceptual decision. I don't know, because all that work is from that one book, a photographer's life. Like it's not from her earlier books, her newer books, her women book with Susan Sontag, who's also pictured in the show, her partner who passed away, I think was his partner. So I'm just like interested in why that book and why not the other books or the other magazines.
Well, if you're assuming he's removing what he considers the most important part of the photographs, and he's using something that was meant to be more than ephemeral, then isn't he really trying to destroy her work in a way? Because he's not taking the temporary stuff, he's taking the stuff that's meant to be permanent
Oh.
and destroying it.
I guess, yeah. I guess he's destroying her work.
Or he's making new work
Yeah.
from her work. Like
Yeah.
one person's destruction is another person's construction, right? Like he's constructing in many ways. But I think it's, you know, it's not like he's picking on like, you know, Annie Smith down the street who's trying to get her career going.
Yeah.
I mean, she is like, and she has been a voice
Yeah.
for a long time. So it's, you know, I think it's okay, you know, like, yeah.
I don't disapprove of his dislike, or what your parent his dislike of her work. I wonder if he discusses the work in a critical way, like I'm against this person, like I don't like this person, like I would like to hear a something that is like that would help me understand it, but also reduce the work to that particular opinion. And right now, I feel like I'm searching for clues to understand what his point of view is, and I like that search for meaning in the work, for like looking for meaning in the gesture, looking for meaning in the holes, or the lack of edges and the rectangles, or the curved edges rather.
Does he ever talk about whether or not he's choosing Leibowitz because she does celebrity photography, and
Yeah.
he doesn't think photography should be restricted to making people famous.
I would hope he says that. I don't know. Like, maybe he does say that. But I know he discussed Arbus and Diane Arbus and Marilyn Mark, who are both photographers who, if you don't know, also objectify people. Marilyn Mark, who died recently, passed away recently, could be argued she did objectify people. She did objectify people in India. She did objectify the prostitutes there. It's kind of heartbreaking work. And Diane Arbus, for sure, absolutely, undeniably, objectified people. See her show at the National Gallery or National Portrait Gallery. Like, all her discussions of that, all of the discussions about that are about the objectification around her work. And another connection, Leibovitz's partner Susan Sontag was critical of Arbus's work. So that connection, I think, plays through.
I don't know how he specifically feels about Leibowitz, but just hearing him talk about the pieces, he talks about them almost the way he would talk about paint.
Yeah.
Like, he talks about it strictly like another media.
Yeah.
Like when he's getting his stretcher bars and his like they all just seem like tools to him.
Yeah.
Like, why isn't she up for grabs, like her work? Because it's in every magazine. I mean, when I look at this work, all of it, I also see this like very intuitive process as well. Like, you know, there's a lot of like cutting and figuring out and where to put the name and where to put the paint and where to put like, you know, this, and then like sort of arriving at a solution from physically like touching and working. And, you know, I always say this to students, like sometimes like intuition is not stupidity, and there's brains in your hands and you have to just sort of go where you're going. And so sometimes that kind of working through things ends up arriving at these kinds of solutions or these kinds of visual things. So I think that's getting closer and closer, like, well, I am removing punctum, and I am quilting, and I am...
I mean, Cloud is definitely a painter, without a doubt. Not that, like, he's dealing with the issues of painting, with the issues of abstraction, representation. That's all happening here. Like, I mean, he's not John Curran, but it's a different interest in painting. Like, John Curran's representational painting, but this is abstract painting, or like collage. And all those things are about how a piece or a canvas is constructed, and like how he's dealing with space and dealing with the image and flattening space and flattening the frame or allowing it to curve by being hung from the ceiling. Those are issues of painting, and that is at the forefront of this. But of course, Stephanie, I can't always talk about that in a critical way, so I'm not a painter, but it's definitely here.
Well, how do you feel about the use of photography in that way? It being used in that way, just as strictly as a media? As
a tool. I appreciate it, or I like it, the way he uses Leibovitz's work in particular, because it's a compelling conversation to me. I thought Richard Prince was pretty funny at the Gagosian show of that use of photography, but I don't know. I don't look at a lot of collage work, to be honest, but I respect its use in painting for sure.
But I will not minimize it as a collage, this piece, honestly.
Okay.
It's something different.
Yeah.
So it's more,
he's calling quilt.
yeah.
Okay, well the other one's
So
called
it's-
collage.
Yeah, these are like, but you know,
It is
we're
a
using
collage,
techniques.
it's a collage, but has a lot of paintings too.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed media, and it has the interior, the cutting, so it's more elaborated to a simple collage.
Absolutely.
So for me, this can be an art piece. It's a mixed media, different, that insert the collage. And when you do the collage, you take an image from everything that's appealing to you. So in this case, you choose this photographer.
Yeah.
But it is interacted with the image of the photographer. So it's interacted with this painting, with this cutting, and to the way it's adjusted. So he made it something that is not a simple collage.
Oh, I wasn't
You know?
claiming they're simple. I think they're
Yeah,
incredibly complex.
and you cannot even say collage. I think this is a mixed media that's included the collage, but it's a mixed media because there's a lot of different media inside.
Yeah. No, I
And,
respect the work for sure.
Yeah.
I just don't look a lot of work like this, but I like it.
What about you, Stephanie?
I think everything's up for grabs. And if it's around you and it's available, and certainly, books and magazines are also affordable. So it's just, it's like anything else. And Cindy Sherman sort of, in many ways, put it to bed, that art history and television and movies and everything else is sort of up for me to pull from. So the same thing also goes with materials, like when is something not okay to use? You know, I just don't know if that's, I think it's okay. I do it.
Okay.
That's because I do it. I think it's, it's like anything else. And it's been going on for a very long time as well, so.
I think we're, oh, go ahead.
Can I put one last thing out there?
Yeah.
So I've just been sitting here thinking about, is it just me, or is there's kind of like a psychosexual thing with these collages? Like, like,
The image, sorry.
well, when you see like the, teenagers like plaster their room with like tear outs, where it's not really collage to make a thing, it's more of a shrine or something, or you see the representation of the serial killer with like the cutouts, and it being a male artist with a female subject, essentially. Like, I can't help but go there, especially when I'm seeing like the word rape.
The one over there you're talking about?
The
Oh,
quotes
this
mainly.
one? I didn't see it well, I just taken. But what I'm thinking of, the first time I saw the exhibition just from the glass, this is the first time I entered it here, that reminded me a lot of graffiti, a lot. So, and that is another different form of art, and is actually the same importance because like the talking from the street in a certain way, the graffiti. So, and it's more aggressive. It's different feeling when you see a work that is graffiti, and you see here in a gallery.
Right.
So it's different also.
Right.
So the fact that you say that reminded you the teenager that's attached to the wall, it's probably
like an obsession. Sort of.
Yeah, well, that's what Annie Leibovitz, in many ways, when we talk about Annie Leibovitz, all we've talked about is like, who's the fan? Our students, high school students. Like, these are sort of like, what would you, more grown-up Tiger Beat?
What?
More mature Tiger Beat? Like the things that the tear outs, instead of putting up like Tiger Beat in your room, you would put up like I've grown up now. I got this Annie Leibovitz film.
I don't think he's a fan of her work, though. I mean.
No, but teenagers, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like teenagers
I
who
don't know,
start
I'm
like.
another generation. I'm from
taking things
1960.
up.
Graffiti for me is the top.
Well, I don't think. I think
Graffiti
that
and 1960 art, that.
that painting or that piece, that the rape, but
Rape of
only
Sabine.
Rape of Sabine piece, like that. That to me, frankly, is that's technically. I mean, it's really good painting. That's not graffiti at all.
What would you say?
That's not graffiti at all to me.
No, it's more as a sign graffiti.
It's like a sign.
It is.
It functions like a sign, and the arrows are like a sign.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak about the sign quality, but like the signs reduce, so we can get sort of the meaning. But he's not reducing something just to get us to obey a traffic thing. He's getting us to sort of really look at not only the rape of Sabine woman, but only the discussion of the rape of Sabine woman. Only the discussion of stories about money and racial mythologies, or those are being pointed out of the frame in many ways. So I interpreted a lot of his work as the reduction to get to the visceral nature, or to get back to sort of like violence was also used in this at some point, to get back to the violence. Annie Leibovitz, and much of her work is trying to sort of, we talked about a little bit about celebrity, but glamour is almost paradoxal to that, and that's sort of really what she's after. Glamour, glamour, glamour. Let me help you look good. Let me help you your career. And so that's sort of also what I think he's working with, not up against, but like using her in many ways as a metaphor,
Yeah.
and her work as a metaphor.
He used also artists, and that star over there is Gilberto Zorio. That is the famous artist, and that he do a lot of stars. Dark, not pink, that is the little twist, but he has a lot of refinement around, so it's not only on the photograph. That one is, the first time I saw is Gilberto Zorio, but it is in pink.
Yeah.
And that one, I feel that is, I feel that's a kind of graffiti. I have to disagree with you, but it's an opinion. And it has a lot of, it take a thing from everything and put it together probably in its own way.
I think we have just enough time for you guys to give your final thoughts on the work, or one last question, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do one last question.
Anybody?
I can sort of
Yeah.
frame it, in terms of symmetry, I was thinking about, with all the different types of pieces, and then you're talking about coming out of the frame and et cetera. So just your thoughts on symmetry and all in this and what's going on.
Symmetry.
I feel like he's also pointing like what's removed. I'm not sure if symmetry is sort of what he's, I mean, I guess there is some, I don't know if that's what he's after as much as he's trying to get really strong, intense meaning within the frame, but he's also trying to get strong, intense meaning like outside of the frame, which is like the audience's thought space.
Well, he's breaking the frame too, and that's what I'm most compelled by, or formally in these works, because, for example, the arrow over there, or this piece, the Sabine, those aren't rectangles with four edges. They're different shapes, and so the meaning of those shapes is it's a meaningful thing to do that in that particular way, like without a four-edged canvas on the wall. And so I'm interested as a photographer who works in rectangles, basically, like what the meaning of that is. And I'm not a well-versed student of painting or anything, but I'm automatically interested in this work just by virtue of like understanding what's going on with the pieces hanging from the ceiling, what's going on with the pieces that don't have four edges, or like the fact that they're not even, like they're like, I think they're like leaning on the wall, so I'm not quite sure. I think they are. And so like that breakdown of what a piece can do and what how he's challenging the viewer to look at his work, to think about what we're looking at, what the subject we're looking at is interesting to me. And he's like even breaking he's breaking the interior of the frame of Leiboviz's pictures to build a new interior that also has holes. So that history, or that the history is broken in the pieces hanging from the ceiling.
Can I ask a question about the installation of collage? Was that the artist's choice to display it that way?